Our first presenter is Robert Beverly from the NSF. He's a program officer for advanced cyber infrastructure. Welcome.
All right, good morning everyone. A warm welcome from the NSF as well on this 10-year anniversary of Trusted CI. I just wanted to say a few words this morning to get us bootstrapped, talk about science, cyber infrastructure, and the view from NSF. Talk real quickly about some of NSF's thoughts on cybersecurity for cyber infrastructure, and then maybe spend a few minutes reflecting on 10 years. So just so everyone has a bit of context, of course, we are from the OAC, which is the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure, where we support and coordinate the development, acquisition, provisioning of state-of-the-art cyber infrastructure resources, tools, and services essential to the advancement and transformation of science and engineering. That's a long-winded way of saying we do all of the big iron, the compute, the data, the software, the networking, the middleware, and of course the people that enable science through cyber infrastructure. At OAC, we do a bunch of activities, and again, I mentioned a lot of these. You'll note that first and foremost, in the upper left here are people, organizations, and communities, which are core, but of course we have other things such as coordination, and user support gateways. We have pilots, and we have R&E networks. My colleague Kevin is here. Cloud resources, and then of course cybersecurity plays a big role in this whole ecosystem of moving from science observations to science discovery, which is what we're all about. So at OAC, we work not only in provisioning research cyber infrastructure, but also doing research on cyber infrastructure itself. A few highlights. Luckily, I was able to steal these from some of my colleagues, but just to give you all a sense of some of the great work that we're doing and some of the science that we're actually supporting, because sometimes it's easy to lose sight of, for the sort of, forest for the trees kind of things. There's been some really neat work that's come out recently. One of these was, of course, the Event Horizon, which had a big announcement about the SAGE star. Recently, of course, in COVID-19, there's been a lot of HPC resources devoted to understanding the SARS virus itself. One thing that I wanted to highlight, this was quite recent, was OAC's investment in Bro, subsequently Zeek, which has now transitioned, of course, to Corelight. And very recently, if you haven't heard, this is now being integrated into the core, no pun intended, of Microsoft Windows itself. So we're very proud of some of these investments and some of the science that has come out of the cyber infrastructure that we actually support. Even more recently, some of you may be aware of Hurricane Ian. This was an event, of course, that hit Florida, and one of the things that was used was some of the OAC infrastructure, in particular the Bridges 2 supercomputing center was used to do hurricane forecasting, and this was actually giving real-time storm surge forecasts during this hurricane. So again, just to re-emphasize the fact that we are, of course, all here to support this cyber infrastructure, but this cyber infrastructure is doing real stuff with very large impact. So again, thank you. So cybersecurity for cyber infrastructure. Let's move on to the meat of why we're here today. I think we all sort of know this, but again, it's good to remind ourselves of some of the unique challenges that we face in this particular landscape of supporting research cyber infrastructure. We often have bespoke environments, so unique environments with unique software, unique hardware. Sometimes there's large instruments, and sometimes these produce very big data, and they require big compute. Of course, science is inherently collaborative, and often involves different specializations across scientists and organizations that are widely distributed, both geographically as well as virtually. And of course, the infrastructure itself needs to be available, all the while in trying to ensure workflow integrity and of course, being easy to use where possible, and of course, adhering to any regulatory or policy requirements that may exist. So there's some unique challenges in this space that we're all tackling. And I think cyber infrastructure, cybersecurity, really we should view as playing a key role in being an enabler of open science and of collaborative science. And that's really why, again, we're here. So when I think, and I think when NSF thinks about cyber infrastructure, cybersecurity, we really like to think about some of the stakeholders and the fact that the cybersecurity for cyber infrastructure really benefits many entities across the organization. Of course, there's the scientists who just want to do their research and, security, please get out of my way. But of course, they have colleagues, right? And with these colleagues, a core component of science is sharing data and resources, right? And of course, in this space, we want to have reproducibility, right? And a core component of reproducibility is the integrity of the data and the workflows. All of this is a key tenet of science itself. Meanwhile, we have management. Of course, they're interested in things like organizational reputation. It's, of course, very bad when your HPC is used to do bad things or makes the front page of the newspaper, or you have to report to the board about some, say, ransomware attack, something like that. And so they're very interested in finance and the aspects of ensuring that the cyber infrastructure doesn't embarrass anyone. The research office sometimes is interested in protecting intellectual property, and this can mean many different things. Meanwhile, the information technology professionals, they're interested in keeping the infrastructure up. They're interested in keeping it available. And then, of course, the public needs to have trust in science. And so cybersecurity plays a role in all of these different components of the science that we support. So at OAC, when we think of securing cyber infrastructure, of course, again, I'm re-emphasizing this, we think about it as an enabler of science and really talking about how we can enable production science, reproducible science, and collaborative science. That's what we're really interested in doing. So at OAC, we've been taking what we like to think of as a holistic approach to securing science cyber infrastructures. So we have a bunch of different programs, all of which sort of feed into this core of the cyber infrastructure itself. So way out on the left here, we have, for instance, at the bottom left, we have the SATC program. This is the Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace program. This is doing fundamental research in security and privacy. Above that, in the upper left, is the CC program. This is actually cybersecurity work that's tailored for cyber infrastructure, and I'll say a few words about that in a moment. Of course, we also have test beds and other programs to prototype and do real-world experimentation. Fabric is a great example of that. Fitting into all of this, of course, is also our networking layers and our regional access layers. So, of course, CC Star has been a huge piece of that whole component, as well as connecting not only the regionals, but the campus networks. We have the cyber training. I've mentioned people several times. It's a huge area of emphasis within the NSF to train the next generation of professionals. Research SOC, which many of you, of course, and we're in the right city for it, know. They do operational support of science infrastructures. The CSSI program is the software and data program within OAC. Often this is things like bespoke libraries, software libraries, and things like that for physicists or chemists or material scientists. And then, of course, the reason we're all here is Trusted CI, which does engagements and all of the activities that you're going to hear about today. So really quickly, I did want to talk about CC and make sure everyone is aware of this program. It's something that we're excited about. CC is the Cybersecurity Innovation for Cyber Infrastructure. This program supports both applied as well as novel research to secure science data, workflows, and infrastructure. We're particularly interested in doing things like operationalizing emerging cybersecurity techniques into the science CI domain, as well as developing new approaches to securing the science CI domain. So proposals were due in June of 2022, and we do have a planned solicitation hoping to hit the street in early FY23. I'm going to skip through this. Last year, or this year rather, we awarded approximately $7 million, and I just wanted to highlight a few of these because there were 3 areas within the CC program. One of these was an area focused on usability, and we have some researchers that are going to be doing some really cool work, very SOUPSy type work, looking at some of the obstacles and challenges that scientists themselves face in securing science and science cyber infrastructure. This is some work out of George Washington and UMD. We've got some folks that are doing some work on reference security data sets this is out of Duke. And they're doing some really cool work that's going to hopefully lay some of the foundation for understanding some of the unique properties of the data and the workflows, as well as anomalies that they see within real production science infrastructures. And then the last one that I wanted to highlight here, I took one from each area of the CC program. There was a new area within CC called TCR, which was a transition for cyber infrastructure resilience. This is some pretty cool work from some folks that have been deeply involved in the DARPA Cyber Grand Challenge work. This is some of the automated reasoning, some of the automated patching type activities, where what they're doing is they're turning their lens to look at some of the software in the science ecosystem to find vulnerabilities and then automatically patch these vulnerabilities. This is very cool because a lot of this software is what we might call, politely under-maintained. Another word might be abandoned or, Fortran or something like this. So they're doing some really cool work in this space that I think will benefit the community hugely. So I have 2 minutes to reflect, so I'm just going to leave some thoughts for folks. I think it's important, since it's been 10 years of Trusted CI, to reflect a bit about where we've been, how the world perhaps has changed, as well as where we're going. I'd like us to hopefully think about the good and the bad, some of the impact the program has had, which has been huge, and some of the missed opportunities. I wanted to this is my way of hopefully saying some thanks to the Trusted CI program. This timeline, of course, cuts off many years, but prior to 2019, of course, we had Trusted CI and Research SOC, but I did want to highlight that NSF has commissioned a couple of reports from the JSON group. One of these that came out in 2019 was a report that they gave us on the fundamental research security. One result of that was NSF actually established a position, the Chief of Research Security Strategy and Policy. Subsequent to that, there was, with the help of Trusted CI, we did actually update something called the Research Infrastructure Guide. This is like the new version of the Major Facilities Guide with a bunch of stronger and hopefully more productive language vis-a-vis cyber infrastructure for major facilities. Some of the programs cross-cutting across NSF are now including more and more language about security. So for instance, the POSE program, which is the Pathway for Open Source Ecosystems, now requires a security plan. And then quite recently, the JSON committee was again commissioned to give a report on cybersecurity specifically for major facilities. And one thing that I wanted to call out was JSON's recognition of Trusted CI as, and this is a quote, NSF's current approach of offering independent external advice on cybersecurity is valuable. They're very understated, but they found this to be a very worthwhile activity. So thank you. I'm going to go 1 minute over if I can, Heidi. This is my last slide, I promise. So just a couple parting challenges that I think would be useful for us to consider. One is, be a mentor or a mentee. I think this is super important, and it's one of the things that at NSF we've sort of identified as a, critical potential, challenge in this space is finding the next generation of workforce. So, please consider what you can do in this space. NSF has a bunch of active programs, and I think it's hugely important. The second is, spread the word. I think it's, I'm often amazed, even within some of the circles we run in, folks that have never heard of Trusted CI despite it being around for 10 years, things like that. So the continuity is amazing. It's super, super helpful. But grab your local researcher, grab your local admin or C-suite or bureaucrat, and tell them about Trusted CI. And then the last thing is, we often get sort of stuck in ruts using the same old tools and techniques, so on and so forth. But the world is evolving rapidly. I talked about a few of these sort of more researchy, applied researchy programs within CC, but there's a growing set of technologies, and not only technologies, but resources available. And Trusted CI makes a ton of resources available. Please take a look at these, test a tool, platform, or data set from one of these programs. So with that, thank you so much. Welcome to the Trusted CI Cybersecurity Summit. And again, we always want your input. Tell us what we're doing right in OAC, what we could be doing better, and what we should be doing. Myself, that's my email, and my colleague, Kevin Thompson, is here as well. Thank you, and hope to talk to you all individually throughout the next 2 days.